Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, June 1st, 2023. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today. Czech general says that NATO is on course for war with Russia. So this is from Kyle Anzalone, the commander of the Czech Republic's armed forces, said that the North Atlantic Alliance and Russia are on the path to a direct war. The general described the potential war as the worst case scenario, but he emphasized that it remains a distinct possibility. And this is General Karol Reka. He is the chief of the Czech Armed Forces General Staff. He told his country's parliament on Monday about the potential for war. He said, quote, "No one wants it at all, but it is not impossible. It is necessary to stop saying that this is not possible because it is simply possible. It can happen, and it is necessary to prepare for it in the long run. We view war between Russia and the North Atlantic Alliance as the worst case scenario, but it is not impossible. It is possible. Russia is currently on a course toward a conflict with the alliance," end quote. So it's definitely concerning to hear, a top military official in a NATO country say something like that. And Kyle goes on to list a few examples of recent things that have happened that could provoke a direct war between NATO and Russia, including the plan to send F-16s, all these Ukrainian attacks inside Russian territory. And so, what this general is saying, I went over this a few weeks ago, that NATO is drawing up war plans for war, drawing up plans for war with Russia for the first time since the end of the Cold War, and those are expected to be, signed and made official at the upcoming summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, in July. So, all these things are very concerning, and there's just no sign that the West, the U.S., NATO are backing down on this policy of arming Ukraine, flooding Ukraine with weapons. All right, the next one here. Russia says that the UK is encouraging Ukrainian attacks on Russian civilians. So the Russian embassy in the UK on Wednesday slammed London over British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly's comments about Ukrainian attacks inside Russia. So if you remember from yesterday, there was that drone attack in Moscow, and Cleverly, the British Foreign Secretary, was asked about it. And he said that Ukraine has the right to project force beyond its borders. And he added that hitting legitimate military targets beyond a country's own borders is an internationally recognized, part of a nation's self-defense. So again, this was a drone attack on residential areas in Moscow. And in response, the Russian embassy said that Cleverly was encouraging Ukrainian attacks on civilians. The embassy said, quote, "The hostile statements by Britain's top diplomat cannot be viewed as anything but an attempt to encourage the Kiev regime to carry out more attacks on civilian facilities and our civilians," end quote. So Dmitry Medvedev, who is the deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, he's also a former Russian president. He also responded to Cleverly's comments, and he warned that British officials are legitimate military targets for Moscow because of the UK's role in the war. So this, Medvedev has been he's pretty over the top with the rhetoric, but still, it's pretty, again, concerning to see a Russian official saying what he's saying basically is that the UK is a party to the war, and that means if we wanted to, we could attack, strike British officials. He said, quote, "The goofy officials of the UK, our eternal enemy, should remember that within the framework of the universally accepted international law, which regulates modern warfare, including the Hague and Geneva Conventions, with their additional protocols, their state can also be qualified as being at war. Today, the UK acts as Ukraine's ally, providing it with military aid in the form of equipment and specialists, is de facto leading an undeclared war against Russia. That being the case, any of its public officials, either military or civil, who facilitate the war can be considered as a legitimate military target, end quote. And Medvedev wrote that on Twitter in English. So, it was meant to be a message for, the British and the Americans. So Cleverly's comments came as the UK they recently began supplying Ukraine with the Storm Shadow missiles, which can hit targets up to 155 miles away. That's a longer range, much longer range than the rockets that the U.S. has been providing Kiev. So the British have really been leading the charge on escalating NATO involvement in this war, including they were the first countries to pledge to send Western-made tanks, their Challenger 2 tanks, which they sent with depleted uranium ammunition. And in response to that, Putin is deploying nukes to Belarus. And the UK also played a role in pressuring President Biden to sign off on the delivery of the F-16. So the UK, just full steam ahead. They don't seem to be concerned at all about the risk of provoking a direct war between NATO and Russia. All right, the next one here. This is one from Connor Freeman at the Libertarian Institute. Berlin orders Moscow to close 4 of 5 consulates in Germany. So this is part of a diplomatic dispute between Russia and Germany. Their ties continue to sour. So as relations between Russia and Germany continue to spiral downward amid the war in Ukraine, the two nations engaged in tit-for-tat moves, closing down consulates and limiting the number of diplomatic personnel in each country. Berlin announced that Russia would be forced to close down 4 out of 5 consulates general the Kremlin maintains within Germany. This move comes after Moscow limited the number of staff at the German embassy and related facilities in Russia. So a spokesman for the German Foreign Ministry told reporters that the decision was made to ensure parity of personnel and structures between the two countries. Moscow is currently deciding which consulates will be shuttered. The Russian consulates in Germany are located in several cities. The Kremlin recently established that an upper limit of 350 German officials, including those working in schools and cultural bodies, will be permitted to stay in Russia. So it's just, again, their relations are just deteriorating, and it's a shame because Russia and Germany had the potential to be great trading partners. They were, at a time there, but that's all, gone away. And this is something, these kind of diplomatic spats, these tit for tat, kicking diplomats out, that's something that started between the U.S. and Russia years ago and kind of led, that was a big part of the deterioration in relations between the U.S. and Russia. And that started, I believe it started in 2016 or 2017. It was Obama, his last, month in office. It might have been January 2017 or it was December 2016. I forget exactly. But it was in response to these allegations that Russia interfered in the election, which turned out to be nonsense. He ordered kicked some Russian diplomats out or ordered them. I forget exactly what the move was. And that started this kind of tit for tat diplomatic moves that Russia and the U.S. did over the past, 7 years. So now you have Germany and this is happening with a lot of other European countries as well. All right, the next one here, this one is from Kyle Anzalone, again, over at the Libertarian Institute. NATO holds Arctic war games hours from the Russian border. And these are NATO exercises in their newest member state, Finland. So the North Atlantic Alliance began military drills hosted by Finland just miles from the Russian border. An American defense official said that the war games show the bloc's commitment to the newest member of NATO. U.S. Army Major General Gregory Anderson said on Tuesday, quote, "We are here. We are committed. The U.S. Army is here training with our newest NATO ally to build that capability to help defend Finland if anything happened," end quote. So that's it. Americans didn't have really a say in Finland joining NATO, but now their government is committed to giving them a war guarantee if anything happens. So about 7,500 NATO soldiers are participating in the exercises dubbed Northern Forest 23. The drills are taking place just a 2-hour drive from the Russian border in northern Finland and will run from May 27th to June 2nd. Reuters described the war games as Finland's biggest modern time land force drill above the Arctic Circle. So there's that. We're going to see more U.S. military drills in Finland, I'm sure, and they're in talks on signing this defense cooperation agreement that's going to lead to the U.S. building new bases in Finland. So the U.S. is going to be expanding its military footprint in that part of the world. All right, the next one here. Macron, the French president, wants concrete NATO guarantees for Ukraine. So Macron said on Wednesday that NATO should offer concrete and tangible security guarantees to Ukraine as the alliance is debating what to offer Kiev at a NATO summit that will be held in Vilnius this July. So Macron acknowledged that it is unlikely that Ukraine can obtain full NATO membership, as all 31 members would need to agree. I saw someone point out in the comments that Turkey and Hungary would never agree to Ukraine joining, and I think that's right. And I think a few other countries would not agree as well. I think there would be a little more opposition just because it would imply NATO going to war with Russia. I would hope there would be more opposition at least. So anyway, so Macron's saying it's unlikely they're going to get full membership, but he's calling for some sort of upgrade. He said, quote, "I think we have to build something between the security provided to Israel and a full-fledged membership. I think we need to talk concrete and tangible security guarantees," end quote. So Polish President Andrzej Duda recently told the Wall Street Journal that Western leaders are considering an Israeli model for Ukraine. And that would mean continuing to supply Ukraine with massive amounts of military aid, but it would not include an Article 5 style mutual defense guarantee. So, but still, long-term plans. And Macron is saying something, greater than what Israel's provided. And, if you just look at the numbers of the military aid that the U.S. has sent Ukraine, Israel gets $3.8 billion every year, which is extremely high, but it's nothing compared to what Ukraine has gotten over the past year. So I would assume that they would keep the aid levels pretty high, even if there was some sort of frozen conflict. So, and this is that same Macron made these comments at the same GlobeSec conference in Slovakia that a Ukrainian official was saying the other day that NATO needs to give Kiev a clear roadmap to membership. And again, the point I always make when I'm talking about this is that, Russia's main motive for invading Ukraine was Ukraine's alignment with NATO. And still their main demand is Ukrainian neutrality, even though, they've added that they need to recognize the oblasts that they annexed as Russian territory, but still Ukrainian neutrality is the big thing. All these plans, go against that and are just going to prolong the war, it seems like. All right. So the next one here, Ukraine and its Western backers plan a peace summit without Russia. So this is Ukraine and all the NATO countries that support it. They want to hold an international summit to increase support for Kiev's terms for a settlement to the conflict with Russia. So while this is being sold as a peace summit, the plan does not involve inviting Russians. So Andriy Yermak, who's Ukraine's president's chief of staff, he reiterated Ukraine's position that it will not hold talks with Moscow unless Russia withdraws from all the territory it has captured. And that position is really a non-starter for negotiations. European officials told the Wall Street Journal that they want to work with Ukraine to recraft its 10-point peace plan to make it more appealing to neutral countries, including China, India, Brazil, and Saudi Arabia. The plan calls for a complete Russian withdrawal and also tribunals for alleged Russian war crimes. For their part, Moscow has said that it's open to talks, but insists that any final settlement, again, as I just mentioned, must recognize those oblasts as Russian territory. Western diplomats said that they're hoping that the Ukraine peace plan meeting can happen before the NATO summit in Vilnius in July, and they expect President Biden and other NATO countries, other leaders of NATO countries to attend. They think they could get Modi there from India. They want to get MBS from Saudi Arabia, and they expect them to come, but they're not sure. They're also trying to get Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, but they're not sure if he, would go to that summit. So we'll see how that all plays out. All right, the next one here. The U.S. announces a new $300 million weapons package for Ukraine. The Biden administration announced this on Wednesday. It includes Stinger anti-aircraft systems, ammunition for the Patriot air defense, and HIMARS rocket systems. It includes a lot of artillery ammunition as well. And these arms are being sent to Ukraine using the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which allows the U.S. to ship weapons directly from Pentagon stockpiles. The funds for the equipment are being drawn from what Congress has already authorized for spending on the war, which at this point totals $113 billion. So they're still using that. The money is expected to run out by the end of the summer, although the Pentagon recently claimed that they made an error by overvaluing some of the arms that they sent to Ukraine. So it gave them a few more billion to work with. And they said it's $3 billion now. They overvalued it by $3 billion, but that number could grow. So they might just be able to find some more money to be able to keep shipping weapons to Ukraine. I'm sure they're going to figure out a way to do it. The list looks pretty big here that the Pentagon put out for a $300 million aid package. It includes ammunition for the Patriot air defense systems, AIM-7 missiles, which are designed to be fired from F-16s and F-15s. They're air-to-air missiles. I'm assuming that they can be fired from the MiGs that Ukraine has now, because, as far as we know, Ukraine doesn't have any F-16s yet, and it's going to take a while for them to get there. They're also getting Avenger and air defense systems, Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, artillery rounds, precision aerial munitions, drone ammunition, AT-4 anti-armor system, over 30 million rounds of small arms ammunition, mine clearing equipment and systems, demolition munitions. So it's a lot of stuff. It's 300 million doesn't sound that big anymore, but this is a pretty extensive list of things that they're sending over there. Maybe they are, drop the value of some of this stuff so they could fit it in to this package. All right. So the next one here, the U.S. discussed Oman mediating talks with Iran. So Brett McGurk, who is the top Middle East official on the National Security Council, he recently made an unannounced trip to Oman to discuss potential diplomatic outreach with Iran over its nuclear program. And this is according to a report from Axios. So tensions have been soaring between the U.S. and Iran since indirect negotiations to revive the nuclear deal known as the JCPOA broke down last year. The Biden administration has taken a very hardline approach to Iran and has continued to increase sanctions on the Islamic Republic. The Axios report cited unnamed U.S., Israeli, and European officials who said that McGurk traveled to Oman on May 8th, and the main topic of conversation was an idea for a new diplomatic push over Iran's nuclear program with Omani mediation. So Iran is currently enriching some of its uranium at 60%, which is the highest level they've ever achieved. And they started enriching uranium at that level in response to an Israeli covert attack on their Natanz nuclear facility in 2021. So Israeli threats and covert attacks and pressure always lead to Iran taking, expanding its nuclear activity. Despite claims from Israeli officials, there's no sign that Iran is working toward a nuclear bomb. They've been very cooperative with the IAEA lately, and making a nuclear bomb requires 90% enrichment for weapons grade uranium, and they're not doing that. And there's no sign that they're going to take that step. So Israel is constantly threatening to attack Iran over its nuclear program, regardless of what's really happening. And Israeli officials claimed to Axios that the U.S. is looking to see if Iran is willing to freeze some of its nuclear activity and wants to know what they would want in return. However, a National Security Council spokesperson denied the claim. So this NSC spokesperson said, quote, "There is no U.S. discussion of an interim deal and no discussion of sanctions relief or closing safeguard cases," end quote. Because this report was saying, even though the Israelis are constantly threatening Iran over its nuclear activity, They are against the U.S. coming to any kind of deal with Iran that might result in them freezing the activity. They're against the JCPOA, which put Iran's nuclear program under very strict limits and the most stringent inspections in the world. So, there's something doesn't make sense about their strategy. And of course, always missing from the conversation is the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. So the idea that this would create some sort of arms race in the region is just not true. If Iran does make a nuclear bomb, but still no sign that that's happening. All right, the next one here is another one from Kyle over at the Libertarian Institute. The UAE suspended its participation with an American-led military bloc. Abu Dhabi has halted its involvement with a Washington-led coalition aimed at preventing Iranian seizures in the Middle East. Iranian ship seizures. It's a maritime grouping here. The UAE disclosed the decision the day after the Wall Street Journal reported growing discord between Abu Dhabi and Washington over the region's lack of American military assets. On Tuesday, the Wall Street Journal detailed the growing frustration that the UAE is not happy that the U.S. hasn't taken a more harsher response to Iran seizing 2 ships. Missing from all the mainstream media write-ups about this story is the fact that Iran seized those ships after the U.S. seized a tanker and stole its cargo, which was Iranian oil. It's very crucial context. But the UAE is not happy. They wanted the U.S. to do more. And the UAE's state media service announced its pullback from the Combined Maritime Forces. That's, again, this coalition of countries that operate in the Persian Gulf together. But at the same time, Abu Dhabi claimed that the Wall Street Journal mischaracterized the rift between the U.S. and, kind of saying that they weren't that angry or anything. So this has happened before. The UAE thinks, that they have the right to, this American protection. When they were attacked by the Houthis, they were part of the Saudi-led coalition in Yemen, waging war in Yemen for years and years. And when, they got the Houthis hit them with a rocket attack, or it was a drone attack, they demanded that the U.S. send military assets to the UAE. And apparently they were really mad because it took a little longer than they would have liked. All right, the next one here, U.S. Stinger shipment to Taiwan. So the U.S. says that the Stinger shipment to Taiwan was from a 2019 sale. So this is an update on a story that I went over yesterday. Taiwanese media reported that a shipment of U.S.-made, Raytheon-made Stinger missiles, which are the portable anti-aircraft missiles that the U.S. sent to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s. They began arming Ukraine with the Stingers right at the beginning of the Russian invasion. And Taiwan's been trying to buy some from the U.S. So anyway, there was a report last week that Stingers were delivered to Taiwan, and Taiwanese media said it was part of this $500 million military aid package that the U.S. has been preparing. But the State Department said that's not true. They said on Wednesday that the shipment was part of a $223 million arms sale to Taipei that was approved in 2019. So it was an arms sale from a few years ago. So I just wanted to correct update on that. So it looks like so far the U.S. has not sent that military aid package yet, or maybe it is possible that they might send it and not make it public because it is Taiwan and just the sensitive nature of it. So, and that would come from the $1 billion in the 2023 NDAA for Taiwan. That is what they call this Presidential Drawdown Authority. It's how they're arming Ukraine. It's the main way that they're arming Ukraine is just shipping things straight from Pentagon stockpiles. And they're going to be arming Taiwan like that soon. Of course, it's going to make China very unhappy. All right, the last one here is from the Gray Zone. British police detain journalist Kit Klarenberg. So Kit is a journalist for the Gray Zone. He writes all over, and he gets a lot of great scoops and leaks and British documents and stuff. We've run his stuff all the time. I mean, we have something lower in the page. I saw him writing for the Electronic Intifada about British spies training, the Palestinian Authority. It's very interesting. So when he was on his way home to the UK, which is where he's from, He was detained by counterterrorism police in Britain, and he was interrogated for 5 hours about the gray zone. They were accusing him, asking if the gray zone had an arrangement with Russia's FSB to publish hacked material. So go check that out. It's just alarming to hear about that. But he's out, as far as I know, and he's doing all right. But it said during his detention, police seized the journalist's electronic devices and SD cards, fingerprinted him, took DNA swabs, and photographed him intensively. They threatened to arrest him if he did not comply. So they really, really went after him. And obviously, this is retaliation for his reporting. And there's a lot of things here related to British politics. I know one of the big things that he reported on was that the British were working with Ukraine on plans to bomb the Kerch Bridge, which is the Crimean bridge that connects Crimea to Russia. And Ukraine did bomb that bridge. They did it in a different way. It was a truck bombing. I believe their plans with the British was using boats, but still, I mean, that exposes, again, just the British role, the fact that they're planning attacks like that. It's insane. I mean, it is directly being involved in the war. And he exposed that. So, they're not happy with that. And in the UK, that type of journalism is a crime, as you can tell from the fact that Julian Assange has been held in Belmarsh prison since 2019, on no charges at the behest of the American empire. So that's it for the news for today. Go check out our viewpoints. We have one from Josiah Thayer about how the UAE and China set their sights on southern Yemen. Go check that out. He's been keeping up on a lot of detailed stuff about Yemen, which is good. One from Judge Knapp, FISA and freedom. One from Michael Ellis. Azerbaijan taught a critical military lesson, but Russia skipped class. That's over at the Libertarian Institute. We have one from Daniel Larison. Biden refuses to lift sanctions on Chinese defense minister. That's over at Responsible Statecraft. And one from Ted Galen Carpenter. Washington's shaky coalition to contain China and defend Taiwan. But that is everything for me for today. That was a lot of stuff. I hope I, covered it all nicely there. You could always support antiwar.com if you go to antiwar.com/donate. Share this show around. Follow me on Twitter. Follow antiwar.com on Twitter. If you want to subscribe to our newsletters, you can go to antiwar.com/newsletter. We send out a daily mailer with this show and all the news stories. And it's good to get on there because if we, when we have to bug you for our fundraisers. But that's it for me for today. I felt like this was the last show of the week, but I have one more. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for listening.